G'day and welcome back to Reality Check Q&A, that time of the week where you get to ask me, your host, Ross Coulthart, the curly questions. And of course, here to help me do that today is Meagan Ourada, our producer and good friend. Hello, Meagan. How are you today?
Ross, just fantastic. How are you doing this week?
Very well. We've got some good news on the horizon. Next Tuesday, September the 9th, there's going to be a task force hearing on the declassification of federal secrets entitled, quote, very optimistically, Restoring Public Trust Through UAP Transparency and Whistleblower Protection. It's on Tuesday, September the 9th, 2025 at 10 a.m. in the US Capitol Visitors Centre, HVC 210. And there's going to be 4 witnesses. One of them is our good friend and colleague, George Knapp, probably the most eminent and most knowledgeable journalist reporter on the issue of UAPs going back decades. But the other 3 are fascinating. They're all alleged UAP first-hand witnesses: Jeffrey Nussitelli, who's a US Air Force veteran; Chief Alexandro Wiggins, a UAP witness; and Dylan Borland, a UAP witness, also a US Air Force veteran. The hearing's going to be open to the public and the press. It will be live streamed. We're going to be doing a special on Reality Check. It'll be midnight my time, the witching hour in Australia, but I'll be there to report live on the events from DC. And we've just had our correspondent in Congress, Joe Khalil, speak to Representative Paulina Luna, who's the chairwoman of this task force, and this is what she's had to say.
Actively getting pushback on our need to know clearances. Just so you know.
From the DOD?
From intelligence agencies, but they're saying that they can't find the authorizing agency to actually give us clearance, which is so crazy.
That seems like a silly question, or it seems like a silly thing, because wouldn't the intelligence agencies have that information?
Correct. So you can see that on our end too. We're still working through stuff, but it is really interesting when you look into some of these people's backgrounds, and I can tell you that we still have been unable to confirm certain people in SCIFs, and so until those criteria are met, we won't be able to get SCIF briefings from anyone.
Okay. Because these clearances are not just you guys, but it's the people that you're trying to bring into the SCIF.
Now, Meagan, my takeaway from that is that, as usual, the intelligence community is putting obstacles in Congress's way to being able to fully and properly interview these witnesses. And it's quite clear they want to take people into the SCIFs where they can be interviewed about things that are possibly national security sensitive. And why on earth, if there's nothing to hide, would anyone from the intelligence community want to put an obstacle in the way of Congress, which, after all, under the US Constitution, has the right to review. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, it has the right to review all congressional expenditure. Why would anyone in the intelligence community or the defense national security establishment want to put any kind of an obstacle in Representative Luna's way to stop them from being able to talk to witnesses if there's nothing to hide?
Great question, Ross. It is that never-ending rat race over there in DC.
It's a bit of a joke, to be honest, Meagan. I do worry that this hearing's a dog and pony show. I know for a fact that there are other witnesses, at least one other witness that was wanted to be called by particularly Representative Burleson, who's been pushing for this witness to appear. And I know that there has been pushback from the intelligence community stopping that witness from speaking, which is absolutely bloody outrageous. When is Congress going to develop a spine and start subpoenaing under oath the people who are obstructing? I think it's time for Congress to start getting bolshy, to start waving a big stick and calling some of these suckers and bringing them before the Congress and asking them the hard questions. I think we're being far too nice.
Well, Ross, last week you interviewed a firsthand UAP witness who is also a U.S. veteran, Caison. That interview is doing awesome for us on the Reality Check YouTube page. We have a couple questions there. I have one statement from Johnny who left this in the comment section. This alone should be sufficient reason to shut down Arrow and transfer their mandate over to the FBI. Your thoughts on that?
Hear, hear. I mean, I think Arrow's inability to fairly and objectively investigate UAP cases is now transparently revealed with the evidence of Caison Best. I do know that the Americans for Safe Aerospace has some people inside Arrow that it respects and admires, and that the new director, Dr. John Kozlowski, is doing his noble level best inside Arrow to try to be fair and objective in doing the work that he's doing. But there's not much hope when you have the fox in charge of the henhouse. Essentially, they're answerable to USD, the Office of the Undersecretary for Defence Intelligence, and it's quite clear that a lot of the obstruction that's happening inside Arrow is coming from the Defence Department itself, to whom Arrow is answerable. There needs to be an independent, objective body that's completely separate from the Defence Department, because frankly the intelligence services and the Defence Department are actively obstructing, and we have Representative Paulina Luna on the record basically saying that in what Joe Khalil has obtained from her inside Congress today.
We'll go to our next question on the Caison Best interview. This comes in from Chris James on X. Hi, Megan. Can you ask Ross to just clarify if the craft disappeared or it moved that fast we can't see it with our eyes? As I don't believe in dimension travel, I think the craft moved that fast we don't see it.
Look, I suspect you're right. Caison didn't know himself. I did ask that question, and it was quite clear from Caison's answer that what he saw was the object quite literally disappeared. And it's one of the reasons why Caison and his colleagues don't think this object was any kind of blimp. There's been quite a few people on the comments saying that this is obviously some kind of blimp. But blimps don't instantaneously disappear on a beautiful cloudless blue sky day where they had 100% visibility. It's quite obvious that whatever the object was, it either instantaneously winked out of existence, which of course is not something within known human physics, or it moved so blooming fast that it wasn't able to be seen with the human eye. We know that there are objects that have been recorded moving at incredible speeds, and I guess the simple answer to the question that's posed by the reader is we just don't know. We have no idea. And that's why this kind of thing needs to be investigated. A few people have pointed out on the YouTube site that this is Cheyenne Mountain. This is one of the most sensitive military installations in the world, and they have radar and surveillance systems in that area precisely for the reason of protecting against overflights and incursions by unauthorized personnel. So presumably there is data that would be available, unless of course it's been deleted by people who are continuing the cover-up. So I think I'd just love to see when people like Caison Best come forward and say that they've made reports about this to organisations like Arrow, and Arrow transparently fails to do a proper job in investigating it. I would love to see somebody like the congressional committee that's investigating this stuff subpoenaing NORAD, Northcom, and saying, okay, let's have a look at the surveillance systems videos for that day. Let's have a look at the radar telemetry for that day. Let's see if anything was recorded in any of the logs for that day. One of the things that Christopher Mellon has pointed out in previous interviews is that Northcom NORAD, until very recently, wasn't reporting incursions that it was actually registering. And these, for some reason, were not being reported down to organisations like Arrow. And part of the new laws is to mandate that these things be properly reported. This is why stronger UAP disclosure laws are so important. This is why Congress needs to grow a pair and grow a spine and start not just calling people and inviting them to appear, but to start aggressively subpoenaing possibly reluctant witnesses and putting them on the stand in open public hearing and, if necessary, grilling them and giving them the third degree and asking why cases like Caison Best's allegations, which are supported, of course, by at least 3 other colleagues, aren't being properly investigated by the institution that the public is being told is supposedly doing objective and rigorous reporting into UAPs. It's transparently obvious now that the Defence Department is deliberately behaving like an ostrich with its head in the sand. It doesn't want to know the answer. Why is there ongoing active obstruction to the Congress when it is legally, constitutionally mandated to do these kinds of investigations? It's time for all political representatives, every senator, every congressional representative, to start asking the hard questions about UAPs.
All right, we will go to our next question from Christian. Is there any rules that the FAA has about UAP or unidentified stuff in the sky? I've heard many close encounters with pilots talking to the FAA. There's tons of those conversations out there, but I've never heard a whistleblower from the FAA. What does Ross think?
Well, there is actually a long way back. I commend people to go and have a look at the history of the JAL case, which was the Japan Airlines cargo plane, which was, I think, flying towards Alaska. I think it was doing an over the top of the world route. And whilst it was in flight, a gigantic object, a huge spherical object, the size more larger than the 747 that was actually flying. It appeared right in front of a captain, I think, by the name of Takeuchi, and he made, much to his chagrin later in life, he really copped it for making this report. He made a full report about what he saw, and commendably he did so. Hopefully organisations like Ryan Graves' Americans for Safe Aerospace will protect pilots and civilian and military witnesses who see these things in aviation now from coming forward and give them the protections they need to ensure they're properly heard. But what happened in the JAL case, there was an FAA senior investigator called, I think, John Callahan. And John had the temerity when the CIA came in, and it was the CIA, for God's sake, that came in and confiscated the radar telemetry tapes that were tracking this object that had been recorded, I think, out of Anchorage Aircraft Control. The CIA, the external, supposedly overseas intelligence service for the United States, for some reason got involved in investigating what was essentially an internal United States aviation issue. Why did the CIA intervene and confiscate the tapes from the FAA? They took them off Mr. Callahan, and thank God he had a pair and showed the balls to basically keep a copy. And when the agency confiscated the data records that recorded the history of this flight, it was John Callahan who came forward, I think, to one of the Stephen Greer disclosure hearings in the early 2000s and revealed that he had the radar telemetry data. So yes, there has been FAA whistleblowers. I talk to people in the FAA. I particularly talk to people on the West Coast and East Coast of the United States who work in air traffic control, who tell me that they see anomalous objects all the time, and that there is a reporting system, because the assumption is that these objects are often US black aircraft. And legitimately, even though there will no doubt be people who squawk that we should all know the full truth, legitimately, I think the military and the intelligence community are intervening to keep possible tracks of highly advanced aircraft that we do know exist, but which aren't yet public. I can understand why they want to keep those aircraft secret. But in the midst of all of that, I am told by some FAA employees that there are objects that are clearly anomalous that are moving at speeds far beyond known human science, and they suspect far beyond known human technology, even Blackwell technology. And there is a pattern of behaviour, but if people really want to take an interest, they should have a look at the JAL case. I think his name was John Callahan. Sadly, John's now passed. I got the opportunity to speak to him a few years back. He was an extremely brave public official who came forward with the radar tapes showing the movements of this object that was being described by the Japan aircraft crew moving in exactly the way that they described.
All right, Russ, we have a question coming in on the interview that you just did on the telepathy tapes. Hi, just one question about tests. Have they contacted or plan to contact someone from Stargate, as those topics seem to me as similar or even the same?
Well, I mean, obviously, the people who ran Stargate are still, some of them are still alive. Hal Puthoff's still alive. Russell Targ is still alive. And I know a couple of other people who were involved in the Stargate program. Yes, I mean, I do agree. I mean, I think what Stargate shows is that the CIA particularly was willing to fund investigative research right back in the 1970s and 1980s into psychic so-called phenomena. And indeed, if you speak to the people, as I have done, it's quite clear from talking to Russell Targ in particular and Hal Puthoff that the program, the Stargate program, was not the failure that it has been represented to be by so many of the debunkers. It did in fact demonstrate valid, usable data, and indeed President Carter himself acknowledged that there was a particular case that he'd been briefed about, which at the time was still classified, but which, because he as president spoke about it, was able to be declassified, and that involved the detection of a Soviet-era aircraft that had crashed in the African jungle that was detected by a remote viewer to within a few kilometres of its crash location, and it allowed the retrieval of that aircraft before the Russians could get to it. Now, I'm aware of other highly classified, still in operations involving remote viewing, which to this day are still classified because they haven't been spoken about by a president. Hopefully Donald Trump might, as president, be willing to speak more openly about the ongoing PSI program that I do know exists inside the US government. I've actually spoken to people that have been involved in collaborations with US government agencies doing remote viewing right now. It's still happening. Remote viewing is still being used as an intelligence tool by the Americans, and you can bet your bottom dollar by the Russians and by the Chinese. There's been a very, very clever psyop disinformation operation to convince the public through movies like The Men Who Stare at Goats, based on the John Ronson book, and it's pushed a line that essentially there is nothing to psi phenomena. There is a lot to psi phenomena, and what Kai Dickens and Dr. Julia Mossbridge and Professor Diane Hennessy-Powell have demonstrated, you will soon see in due course in a peer-reviewed journal, hopefully, papers basically demonstrating that they have been able to confirm telepathy, that telepathy is real. This is mind-blowing, and I think a lot of people have actually missed the implications of our interview with Kai Dickens and Dr. Julia Mossbridge. The implications are immense. It suggests that these non-verbal autistic children are doing something that has long been speculated about, but never proven. And if you believe what Dr. Julia Mossbridge told us, along with Kai Dickens in the interview that you can find on our Reality Check archive, you will see that they are saying that very soon Kai will be broadcasting on her forthcoming documentary sometime in 2026, and hopefully Dr. Julia Mossbridge will be publishing a paper at some stage as well to prove definitively that telepathy is real. It's getting really interesting in the world of high strangeness. A lot of the stuff that the debunkers have pouring scorn at for so long is now becoming provable to the point where it's getting very hard for the debunkers to evade the truth.
Absolutely. We will go to Willie Taylor next. Hey, Russ, since you now know the TicTacs are Lockheed Tech, should we take everything David Grush says with a pinch of salt since he told you that the TicTacs are truly anomalous? Keep up the good work, mate.
Look, we don't say, and I've never said, that all TicTacs are Lockheed Martin. If you listen back to what I've said that my sources, multiple independent sources, have told me that the 2004 TicTac US Nimitz incident was in some way controlled or operated by Lockheed Martin, that it was a blue on blue. And if you think about it, why did the admiral of that battle cruiser fleet know and not register any surprise at all when he was approached and told about these objects? It doesn't mean that all TicTacs are human Lockheed Martin or other private aerospace corporation operated. As I've said repeatedly, and there's some mischievous disinformation going out there on the internet from people who are deliberately sowing disinformation, trying to cause mischief, it is entirely possible that what I am told Lockheed Martin was operating that day was an NHI retrieved craft that was being operated in some way by some kind of psy-operator. It doesn't mean that all TicTacs are Lockheed Martin. So please have a think about the implications of that. It's on the record that there is, from multiple witnesses, that there is an effort by the United States to use psy-operators, people with psionic abilities, to manipulate, to operate retrieved non-human technology. We know, or I know from my sources, that there are problems reverse engineering a lot of the highly advanced technology that has been retrieved. And I know some people will be rolling their eyes and saying, spew all, give us all of your information. I have to protect my sources as a journalist. And frankly, I'm only ever as good as my sources as a journalist. The reason why I've said that Lockheed Martin was responsible for the 2004 TicTac incident, highly controversially, by the way, there are a lot of people who've told me I should never have said it, and I don't think that's a healthy thing in the study of the UAP issue. If somebody can prove me wrong, prove me wrong. Very happy to hear it. It's always, I think, remotely possible that my sources, who are multiple and independent, they don't know each other, are telling me the wrong thing. I guess it's possible that there is some kind of massive psyop going on to disinform me. That's possible. I think extremely unlikely. But you can't say all TicTacs are Lockheed Martin just because I'm saying that the 2004 TicTac incident was a blue on blue, where Lockheed Martin was actually in some way testing its technology against a carrier fleet. I want to make that very, very clear because there's been a lot of misrepresentation in the last few weeks since I made the statement that I made.
That's exactly why I left that question in there, Ross.
No problem.
All right, Shardul, she's emailing us. Hi, Ross and Megan. There have been multiple claims that JSOC is involved in UFO crash retrievals for the U.S. government. Is there any merit to the name Cobra Sims Special Intelligence Mission Section being associated with these retrievals from JSOC? Thank you.
I have heard the name Cobra Sims because a lot of people on the internet in the UAP commentary community are suggesting to me that this is somehow the secret name of the legacy retrieval and reverse engineering program. I have no actionable data that suggests that Cobra Sims is a name of any ongoing operation. There are people who have convinced themselves that it is the name. I have no evidence to support that. I have been sent a document that has Cobra Sim written on it, and I think it's a fake. Unfortunately, there are a lot of AI-generated fakes doing the rounds right now, and I urge people to be extremely skeptical of a lot of the purported secret documents that are all structured and written in a particular way. I think a lot of people are sitting down, they're literally bored boys in their mama's basement, and they're sitting down thinking it's a pretty cool thing to talk to an AI and ask it to design you a secret document, and they get their kicks by putting it up on the internet and seeing if somebody can be suckered into running it. And sadly, that's what's going on at the moment. I think we have to be extremely careful of any so-called secret documents that are being placed up online. There's been a couple I've been asked about, and I've been able to prove them false. And I have not seen any evidence at all that there is a codename Cobra Sim. And if you think about it, it's far too sexy a name. In my experience with black military projects, they normally choose the most banal, dull, grey, boring name possible. Probably, like blue fish or grey gnome. Something that sounds completely and utterly boring. Maybe it's the codes for the cleaning cupboards in the Department of Defence, but frankly, I don't think Cobra is going to be one of the names.
All right, thank you, Russ. Next question's coming from Ed. Hi, Ross and Meagan. Has the question been considered on why these aliens themselves have not done anything significant to make themselves fully public? I mean, being more advanced than us, they are not our slaves. So nothing stops them from asking for a press meeting with, say, the US president, or for example, Zelensky, or contact Fox, CNN, NewsNation, Al Jazeera, or some other channel and offer one or more interviews. As it is right now, they are hiding in the shadows while giving interested humans just enough sights here and there to keep them in a wild goose chase. Presumably that suits their aims, but that begs the question what those aims are. After all, they have done nothing to stop COVID-19 or any other issue here on Earth. Something to think about. Best, Ed.
Well, fans of the program will know that this is one of the questions I often ask myself. I mean, frankly, I do. I find it perplexing that if there is an NHI presence engaging with this planet, why it isn't more overt. I don't know. I can only speculate. And maybe, as David Grush hinted to us in June of 2023, maybe there are agreements. I've never been able to get David to speak more on what he meant when he referred to agreements in his DOPSA, in his Defence Office pre-publication security review. But frankly, it's one of the things that I would like to see the Congress ask questions about, even if it's only in a skiff inside a secure room where it can be discussed confidentially. If there is an agreement with an NHI, I think the Congress and the world needs to know about it. Another possible reason that's been cited to me by people, and again, this is speculative, is maybe humankind needs to go through some kind of spiritual development, some kind of awareness, some kind of coming to terms with being human. I mean, frankly, we are a bunch of primitive apes. We're fighting trench wars in the early part of the 21st century, 100 years on from World War I, which was meant to be the war to end all wars. We're clubbing each other over the head. We're bombing each other in different parts of the world. We're a murderous, homicidal, brutal, often amoral being that, frankly, if I was someone of an advanced technology considering us for admission to some kind of galactic grouping, I'd be looking on as thinking what a grim bunch of apes we all are and whether or not we deserve membership. Maybe there's a transition. Maybe there's a spiritual awakening that we have to go through. I find it fascinating that millions of people, I do think it's millions, certainly I'm getting to the hundreds of thousands at this point, are contacting me basically saying that they are having direct interaction with NHI that is communicating with them, saying to them that, they need to meditate, that they need to engage and talk about the phenomenon. I wonder whether the phenomenon isn't choosing to completely sidestep governments because it knows how bloody hopeless they are and how prone they are to lying and deceiving the public on the UAP issue. Every government will always try and secure some kind of an advantage over a foreign adversary rival by secreting this technology, as we suspect the United States, Russia, and China are doing. So maybe what's happening, and certainly this is my favourite thesis, is that the phenomenon is in some way psychically, telepathically reaching out to certain people and enjoining them to start becoming aware of its existence. Maybe that's the best way of waking up humanity to the fact that there is an other there. Maybe it just doesn't think that the institutions of government, the institutions of the United Nations, the mainstream media, they're not relevant. Why would an alien sit down and do an interview with the New York Times when the New York Times has done its level best to put its head in the sand on the issue since the groundbreaking stories done by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal? It's actively collaborated in the psyops disinformation operations perpetrated by the defence and intelligence community. Every single American mainstream network, with the exception of NewsNation, frankly, maybe a bit of work done by NBC's Gabby Schwartz. I mean, there's not really a lot of journalism being done by people other than myself, Chris Sharp at the Liberation Times, George Knapp over in Las Vegas. There's not a lot of mainstream journalists covering this issue. And you have to ask, why would any NHI presence speak to CBS, ABC, NBC, PBS? Why go to the mainstream media? If any NHI are watching, sometimes I wonder if they are, we'd have you on tomorrow onto Reality Check, and I can assure you that there is a lively, engaged, enthusiastic, and highly interested audience that would like to hear what you've got to say.
An open invitation.
Is that all for this week? That's
Ross,
it.
I'm cutting you loose. You're done.
No problem at all. Well, obviously, next week we will have the UAP hearings, and we'll be covering those live for Reality Check. It'll be midnight my time, so I promise not to fall asleep at my desk, but I'm very excited to hear what these three new witnesses and George Knapp have to say. And of course, if you do have any questions you'd like to send my way, you can email us at realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Thanks for joining us, and thank you, Meagan.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.